sandworm is going to hit the ground in the back, and it's going to create the shockwave. In the middle of one of his lines, we're trying to make it look like the hat flies off practically. It's cheaper and easier than doing it on the computer.
Hey, my name is Theo Brown. I'm a director living out in LA. I do commercials and narrative projects. And for this particular commercial, I got a chance to direct it.
Hi, I'm Sean Amlaner. I am on this project, the VFX soup for the commercial that we're doing for CG Spectrum. So just get, as long as we have the action coming up,
Love it.
or you could join us at CG Spectrum.
Rolling. This is one Bravo. Take one. Roll camera. Mark.
Something that we knew from the jump was that we wanted to find an area that would really let Sean and the other teachers at the school really be able to just showcase their talents and skills so that prospective people watching it could see the full scope of what they were doing. And we had talked about, do we find like an empty warehouse? Do we find like an empty street and stuff like that? And I feel like natural, we kind of like realized that we both wanted to work on some sort of natural kind of location.
A lot of these kinds of projects many times are inspired in part by pre-existing franchises or pre-existing features. You know, a goal being, you know, you might not work on the movie itself, but you want to do something that's kind of like it or that is inspired in part by it. As we were going back and forth between ideas, eventually it evolved into this concept, why don't we go for a Dune-inspired look?
I think we'll both agree, like the best kind of visual effects is the one that actually pushes the story forward. No one's going to complain about Luke Skywalker's lightsabers in the original trilogy, right? We're so engrossed in the story. And then like from the producibility thing, it's like, okay, well, like if we're shooting inside, we'll need all lights. Well, if we shoot outside, well, we'll need something big. A desert's cool. Dune worm is pretty big. And I think like from there, it just kind of naturally happened just from us ping-ponging, bouncing off ideas, not being afraid to let us get stuck on something, but just to kind of keep pushing it and really just seeing, you know, where we take it.
The goal being that the finish of the commercial would be him sitting down at his home office computer to start teaching, because the whole point of this commercial was also to show and illustrate the point that every single mentor we have is actively working in the industry. So when they teach what they are sharing with the students, it is not just because conceptually they know that that's what it is, or because they read it in a book or they heard it in a chat room online or something. It's because quite literally for many of them an hour or two or three prior to their class meeting, they actually did that in studio or on the lot or wherever it is they're working professionally. It's going to be the desert shoot. We're going to be adding a giant sandworm in the background. Lots of effects. It's going to be fun. That's about it.
So when it came time to like getting the shoot planned out and everything, we had planned on getting to this location about 2 hours out of central LA. And of course, you know, with like how all films go, everything goes smoothly, and things went so smoothly. In fact, that our gaffer who had all of our grip stuff for shooting out there had a flat tire and was so far away from us that we just kind of had to make that decision to start the day of, can we do this without the additional gear? But, and this goes to Sean's credit, you know, the movie is made in pre-production and not production. And since we kind of knew everything as far as like the shooting style, we got the location scout ahead of time with Tim, the DP, who was just a cornerstone of all of this process as well. We realized that we could still shoot it and could still get like a really great image based on the gear that we were using.
So this is location 1, we got all our desert stuff. And now we are going to eat. And then we're going to be going to location 2 to shoot like the last little bit in the office.
the last bit of the commercial, which is walking into a room location, which established the green screen that the talent walked in and then sat at the computer. And even though that shot isn't on screen nearly as long as the first bit, it probably took us about 1.5 to 2 hours to light for that space and then light the room and stuff like that, just to give a natural looking room a natural looking light. So that was how it was. That first location, we took some licks at the beginning, but once we were looking at the footage, I think we were all blown away by like how strong the image was, effectively only using natural light. We'll be able to get it color graded and such, but that in-camera image was phenomenal. It was we couldn't have asked for a better cloudy morning. Couldn't have asked for a better one.
So just talking about the practical effects that we did on set, the first one was trying to create a practical look of the hat blowing off of our spokesperson in the desert. On set, it looked pretty silly. It was quite literally a fishing pole with the fishing line extended out of the end of the pole down and attached to the top of the hat. What that meant, though, was we were trying to time that to the fact that when the shockwave hits from the sandworm in the background, which you wouldn't see until it's created digitally later in post-production, would give that feeling of an actual practical effect where his hat blows off. Now, you might ask, well, why didn't we do that in post? This is where you're dealing with kind of the catch between what do you do on set versus what do you do in post-production. For something like that, where we wanted his hat to blow off, it made a lot more sense to do that practically. And then augmenting that practical effect with a bunch of digital visual effects. So that'd be the shockwave, an air current that hits him and makes his hat blow off, digitally adjusting some of his clothes so it makes it look like it kind of moved his clothes a little bit, all those kinds of things. Another one of the practical effects that we were looking for was we wanted in the office scene, we wanted it to be a little bit more magical. We wanted it to have kind of that welcoming feeling. Well, that was where Theo and his crew really, once again, shined really brightly. And were able to not only set up a fairly complex set of lights, both inside and outside the room, but also ensure that you had that magical moment. And one of the really cool things that they used, I call it smoke in a can or atmosphere in a can. But Theo, what is the technical name for this?
It's literally something that Tim always has. I think it's just atmosphere in a can. I think you're actually saying the scientific name. Yeah, it's literally just made to catch and hold the light. It's the reason that, if you're watching a scary movie or horror movie or whatever, and someone's sweeping a flashlight through a room, especially in older films, you pump in enough haze, the camera can't pick it up, but the light beam can pick it up. So we knew we weren't going to go for anything that strong. We just kind of wanted like a bit surreal, like the light just kind of catches it and like uplifts it, and you can't really put your finger on it unless you're Tim, right, who has atmosphere in a can. But for Sean, and myself, it's like, hey, what can we do to kind of lift it up a bit?
For them to have done what that took 10 seconds in post-production would have taken us several weeks to be able to achieve. So that's that fine balance between what do you do practically on set to offset the post-production visual effects costs, but it's also just about trying to give as realistic of an experience that the viewer can gain, even in a commercial as this.
Bring the industry to you. You can just go ahead and just
It's not just about pre-production and scouting the location, planning out. It's also about taking site notes. It's about taking down pertinent info from, for example, the type of camera and the lens that you utilized on over to time of day, taking measurements so that you have an idea, for example, of the height of the cameraman. If it's a handheld rig, what's the height of where the lens is in relation to the ground? What's the rough distance between the lens and the actor's face? You're also having to take photographic reference of the environment that you're in. So this involves trying to ensure that you not only have lighting that matches appropriately to the space, but it's also getting that tonal range and that value range that would also be very critical on the CG visual effects side, because if you don't have lighting that's digitally created, that digitally matches back, and when you composite those visual effects in, that's where it separates the viewer out when they're watching it. And then having access to people like Theo and Tim and the rest of his crew, being able to ask them questions, to be able to say, hey, what kind of tonal range does this light bank utilize? You know, being able to take all that information down and then pull it into the 3D world is very critical to getting a proper realistic visual effect.
CGI, worm action, and stuff like that.
We have a job where, yeah, we're going to be shooting the sunrise, and then we're going to go inside a house, and then maybe tomorrow we shoot on a soundstage where we're simulating rain, and then maybe we shoot some underwater stuff. It's the most fun thing in the world, especially when you're doing it with your friends, because you're going to spend so much time with them together. I mean, film is like a pressure cooker. You're going to spend time with them. You're going to get to know all sorts of sides of them. But when you love the people that you work with, you're doing the impossible every day. And I think Walt Disney said it's kind of fun to do the impossible.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap.
So that's how the CG Spectrum worm commercial was made. If you want to be able to create epic scenes like this, head over to the CG Spectrum website and check out some of our industry-led courses, many of them mentored by the very people who made this commercial. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.
Javier and Nicole Kidman.
I know. Aaron Sorkin written.
Aaron Sorkin.
I love.
You're going to see that.
I love Lucy.